Let's talk about the Arizona Cardinals as I have the producer of the Red Reigns podcast with Walter Mitchell, Kyle Ledbetter, my esteemed co-host. This is the third time they're going at it. The last time they played, it was that Monday Night Thriller. Cardinals in the last few weeks, 4 out of the last 5 to close the season they've lost. They are a shell of the team that started the season. How are they going to recover, or are they going to recover against the Los Angeles Rams?
Well, there's an easy explanation for all of this with the Arizona Cardinals, which is if they don't lose to the Detroit Lions, they're the 3 seed in the NFC playoffs. Like, it's just as simple as that for Arizona. It's like, what happened to the Cardinals at the end? Well, they lost to Detroit. And that just kind of messed up all the math on doing the analysis here. It's why Buffalo's the 3 seed instead of the 1 seed in the AFC. It's like, well, they lost to the Jaguars. Doesn't make sense, but it happened. The Arizona Cardinals thing is just injuries. The Arizona Cardinals didn't have a lot of depth coming into the season. It's a lot of Dennis Gardeck's and Jalen Thompson's running around at this point in the season. And they just had like an apocalyptic hellscape of injuries. And Cardinals fans are pissed about it too. Like, Cardinals fans are really going after the idea of, we didn't belong in the playoffs. This team keeps folding at the end of the season. I'm like, well, it's easy to explain. DeAndre Hopkins has been gone for 2 months. JJ Watt's been gone since week 7. Both of their offensive guards who weren't that great to start the year have been injured. Rodney Hudson missed 8 games during the season, and he was supposed to be the guy who revamps that offensive line. Max Williams has been gone since about week 4. He was an awesome tight end. Yeah, they brought in Zach Ertz, but that hasn't really worked out the way they hoped it would. He's a fine player, but hasn't worked out the way they hoped it would with bringing in Ertz to replace him. They've had Robert Alford is now gone. I think he's not going to play this week, but he's been gone during this losing stretch that they've had. They lost Malcolm Butler at the start of the year because Malcolm Butler just basically said, I can't do this anymore, in a really shocking, bizarre way to walk out. And they already didn't have a great secondary before that, but the secondary like ridiculously overachieved at the start of the year. And then they came back down to earth once they lost Alford, and they realized that Byron Murphy is not a true number 1 corner, even though he was playing Pro Football Focus grade like a number 1 corner for the first few weeks of the season. Arizona just had a hellscape of injuries that made it so that, and they also got really, really lucky in starting 9-0. Like, they probably should have started 7-2, but they just happened to start 9-0. And that kind of changed the expectation bar because they had a better record than the Packers going into that Thursday night football game they played, where AJ Green didn't turn around. And I thought that they called timeout because I was listening to the game on mute. So that's your explanation for the Cardinals. It's just an apocalyptic hellscape of injuries that is the reason that they're now the 5 seed in the NFC and probably weren't better than the Seahawks on Sunday. Seahawks were probably a better team than them, not just a weird result. Like, Seahawks just outplayed them.
Well, that's disappointing to hear when you talk about a team in the playoffs being a worse team than the Seattle Seahawks, who finished with 6 wins this season. I think
7 wins.
7 wins.
7 wins. And they also lost to the Bears in there. So that's 8. And Russell Wilson missed 6 games. So the Seahawks probably should have been the 7 seed instead of the Eagles. If Russell Wilson just doesn't miss 6 games, they're probably the 7 seed instead of the Eagles in the NFC. It's not like it's that awful of a team in Seattle.
But still, they're not a playoff team, and the Cardinals are, and the Cardinals are going into this game against the Rams, who are a playoff team as well. And the Rams, although they're coming off a loss, it's hard to read too much into that loss, mostly because I do factor in the opponent, and I'm not getting cocky when I say this, but the Niners own the Rams at this point. It is what it is. We're talking about 6 straight victories for the 49ers over the Los Angeles Rams. It's just a bad matchup. And they always talk about styles make fights. Whenever the Niners and the Rams go together, the fight tends to favor the 49ers. Going against the Cardinals, though, this was a split matchup earlier in the year. And in the first one, the Cardinals ran away with it. The Cardinals ran away with it because Matthew Stafford was throwing some bad interceptions. And what was the difference when they played last time on a Monday Night Football game was that Matthew Stafford was phenomenal. Matthew Stafford, 23 for 30, 3 touchdowns, hitting Cooper Kupp on big plays, got Odell Beckham Jr. involved, I believe, in that game as well. The Rams offense played mistake-free football, and that was the difference. Whereas if you look at the Cardinals, obviously Kyler Murray had a couple picks in that game. So the turnover battle is going to be the biggest point of contention to who's going to win this game. And it's hard to say who you would bet on more to turn over the ball because, again, Kyler Murray during this stretch, I feel, has been asked to do more and to try and force more throws, especially when you mentioned D-Hop has not been on the field. And that's led to some interceptions on his behalf. But Matthew Stafford, And I think a lot of Rams Twitter, a lot of Rams fans are trying their best to try and explain this. Explaining his turnovers is hard because there's no earthly reason why he should be making these mistakes, because some of these are rookie level mistakes that a 10-year plus veteran should not be making at this point in their NFL career. And this is when Lions fans that kind of warned you about Matthew Stafford feel a little bit more vindicated, seeing that Matthew Stafford is still making mistakes that cost their franchise over multiple years, except he's doing it on a better team and with higher stakes on the line. This is Matthew Stafford's biggest game, arguably, in his career. I can't name even a close second. And Matthew Stafford, I think if you really go through his career, has probably played less than 10 big games in his entire career, mostly because the Lions have just been out of playoff contention the majority of his time there.
He did play in 3 playoff games. You know, yes, he was up again 10 points against the Cowboys.
Less than 10. I'm saying less than 10 big games in his career. You would say the 3 playoff games he's had, maybe last week against the Niners, because they didn't know that the Seahawks were going to beat the Cardinals. So the division was on the line, and he still came up short because, they didn't know what the game result was going to be. And he came up short against the 49ers. He threw an interception at the end that ended the game. His other interception led to a scoring drive. And you talk about the pick sixes. Going into last week's game, we were saying he had 5 interceptions and 53 dropbacks. I can only assume that number is somewhere around 7 in the last 80 now, given the Niners game factored into that. I'm going to say I believe in McVay more than I believe in Kingsbury. And I think that's why I'm going to go with the Rams in this game.
So here's the interesting thing I believe about this game. Regardless of which Stafford shows up, the Rams can still win. In this game, regardless of which Stafford shows up, the Rams can still win the game no matter what. Now, Kyler Murray might do some God shit because Kyler Murray can do that every now and then. He doesn't do it as often as, say, like Aaron Rodgers, but Kyler Murray's like undoubtedly already one of the 9 best quarterbacks in the NFL, like easily top 10, because the 10 cutoff point is like Joe Burrow, and Kyler Murray's better than Joe Burrow. I know Joe Burrow's awesome. Like, it's not an indictment of Joe Burrow. It's just Kyler Murray's like freaking awesome at quarterback. Kyler might do some God shit, but again, his team is probably like a fringe playoff team as currently constructed. Like, with all the injuries that have gone on, DeAndre Hopkins probably not going to play because he had surgery on a torn MCL 6 weeks ago. It's insane that we're even talking about him playing. It's insane that we're even talking about JJ Watt playing in this game. Like, it's just the Cardinals doing everything they can to stay afloat. So like, Kyler could do some God shit and like, it'll be Stafford has to be perfect to win, but more likely than not, and that's kind of what we're doing here, I could see a scenario where Kyler does God shit and Jalen Ramsey gets burnt by AJ Green. I don't know. It's hard to say it out loud, but it's possible. It's not like it's the Eagles game where it's a foregone conclusion they're going to lose, and the only way they lose is if the Buccaneers just have an apocalyptically terrible game. Like, the Rams could make mistakes and the Cardinals still win. The Rams could do things almost perfectly and the Cardinals could still win, like if Kyler Murray does some God shit, but they can get away with Stafford making mistakes and still win this game. And that's just because of the opponent they're playing. Now, if they win this game and they have to go on the road to Lambeau next week, then Stafford has to play a damn near perfect game to even have a chance of winning the game, because Stafford could play perfect and they still lose to the Green Bay Packers. But this week they can get away with it. And it's why they're 4-point favorites. And it's why I'm taking the Los Angeles Rams, even if this is a St. Louis Rams helmet I have in my hands. I am taking the Rams to win because the Rams are simply a better team than the Arizona Cardinals. Not in the same way that the Eagles are a better team than the Bucks, but in a way that the Arizona Cardinals just too many injuries to overcome this year. Similarly, it's like Diet Baltimore, basically. It's like Baltimore if Lamar Jackson had stayed healthy, is what's happening with the Arizona Cardinals. Just no depth, key players getting hurt across the board. Just really bad luck for Arizona, but they're still in the playoffs because they have Kyler Murray.